Good evening. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Becca Keenel, president of the Save Acworth History Foundation. Tonight we're going to talk about Black recreation areas of North Cobb. In a few minutes we're going to hear from Acworth Alderman Tim Houston, but we're going to start off with Mr. History, Andrew Bramlett.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to try out this lapel mic. Microphones famously do not like me, so we'll see how this goes, but fingers crossed. First order of business, I've made a mess of cords back here for myself. If I trip, please wait a respectful time before laughing, but laughing is encouraged. So today's presentation is Historic Black Recreation Areas of North Cobb. So for my part of this presentation, I've split it off into two sort of distinct sections. First one on King's Wigwam, second one on George Washington Carver State Park. Both have fascinating stories. I will say the Wigwam portion is a bit more polished, I'll say. I put it together as a paper for school about a year ago. So it's a bit more fleshed out, a bit more to it. George Washington Carver, though, still has a very interesting story. I don't mean to shortchange it, and we'll be hearing a lot, hopefully, from Tim Houston about it. But just wanted to go ahead and put that out there. First of all, I'm curious, for a quick show of hands, who has heard of King's Wigwam before? That is more than usual. So it is a fascinating story. So we're roughly familiar with our area, of course. The Wigwam was actually located in Kennesaw. It was a forgotten summer resort, about a century ago, called King's Wigwam. Its origins of its story is sort of very murky in many cases. There's a lot of information out there about it. There's a lot of incorrect information out there about it. And part of the goal of this research had been to actually go through and sort out truth from fiction. And we'll see sort of what that entails in just a second. It had this calamitous end in 1919 we'll be covering soon. It is a fascinating story. It's one of my favorite stories out of North Cobb. And we certainly have a lot of great ones here. So, to start with, the existing research on the Wigwam is very spotty at best. There's only one local history book that mentions it, Patrice Shelton Lassiter's book from the Images of America series. It's a fantastic resource, and it mentions that the Wigwam was owned by Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, we'll cover a little bit later, and possibly named for his daughter, Victoria Turner King. Lassiter also adds that Atlanta undertaker David T. Howard may have owned it, and Howard's name appears a couple times in different Wigwam information. Her book also has the only known photo I have found of King's Wigwam. It is this one right here from 1918, showing a baptism at the resort. It is just a great photograph. I'm glad that there's something out there of it. In 1977, there was a book published called Certain People, America's Black Elite by Stephen Birmingham. It was an academic book, but he interviewed Nina King Miller, who was the daughter of Wigwam's owner, Cornelius King. And thanks to that interview, Birmingham's account is one of the best accounts of the Wigwam story that has ever been published. However, he wasn't clear on a couple details. He couldn't figure out its exact location or the years that it was open. So he sort of found ways to not directly address that. He never gives exact dates or an exact place, because so far as I can tell, he just was never able to figure it out. It really is a great resource, though. There's a 2021 book called Black Indians and Freedmen, the African Methodist Episcopal Church and Indigenous Americans, 1816 to 1916, by Christina Dickerson Cousin. Quite the mouthful of a name, but it also has a bit of information about the Wigwam because of the resort's name. Wigwam, of course, coming from Native American traditions. The final book I'll reference is Mary Stanton's work, Recreation Without Humiliation, Black Legion of the 20th Century South, another great resource that has a lot of good information, but it is slightly incorrect on the dates. She's actually off by a year on each end of when it opened and when it closed, which was kind of interesting to see. And there's some other sort of scattered references to it in different articles and Journal of Southern History and all. Some saying it was open in the 1920s, some saying 1916 till 1920. All sorts of various information. Some of y'all may remember Davis McCollum. He ran the Old Marietta Facebook page for many years. He said that it was, the Vulcan Quarry on the other side of Kennesaw? He said that was the site of a wigwam. And that's about the only location that I've really found associated with it. Outside of this research is that quarry. And as we'll see, that is not actually the case as to where it was. Kennesaw at the time was incorporated in 1887 as a very small farming community. We think of Kennesaw today as, almost 40,000 people. It was not 40,000 people back then, certainly, a whole lot smaller, which becomes sort of important as we get along in this story. In 1889, just 2 years after the city was incorporated, Bishop Henry McNeill Turner purchased 40 acres of land on a road traveling northeast out of town called Shiloh Road, later renamed Cherokee Street. There is still a Shiloh Road, it's just an extension of the old Shiloh. Turner is a very important figure in sort of Georgia African-American history. He actually was the first African-American U.S. Army chaplain served in the Civil War. He was a state legislator during Reconstruction. His portrait still hangs at the state capitol today, and he was a very influential religious leader among Black Georgians. He was based out of Atlanta. We don't exactly know why he bought land up in Kennesaw, possibly just as a farm. We don't really have a lot of information about sort of that side of his life. We have a deed record for it, we have scattered newspaper references, that's about all. In 1887, his daughter, named Lincolnia Victoria, married Cornelius King, who actually lived in Oklahoma at the time. King's father was Black, while his mother was a Cherokee woman named Phyllis. The entire family was enslaved when Cornelius King was born, but his father was able to purchase their freedom in 1863. King was very proud of his Native American heritage. In his obituary, it said he collected Native American artifacts. After Victoria and Cornelius' wedding, they lived in Arkansas for a while before moving to Atlanta. And it was in 1892, while in Atlanta, that Victoria passed away, actually in childbirth. King, however, would remain very close to her father until Bishop Turner died much later on. He was very close to the King family for many years. In the 1890s, was actually a secretary, worked under the Secretary of the Interior, Hoke Smith, up in Washington as part of the Dawes Commission. Very important part of Native American history. Not really connected to this, but just an interesting little fact about him. And slowly became a talking point of the 1906 gubernatorial election. In 1911, King purchased the 40 acres of Kennesaw land that his father-in-law had owned. In a later interview, he gave a very convoluted reason for why he purchased land in Kennesaw. He said that as a boy, he heard about a speech by Georgia's former Confederate Governor Joseph E. Brown that praised Native Americans, and he resolved after that to move to Georgia. On arriving in the city, he just went and tried to find Governor Brown and found him, and they struck up a friendship. Brown is then head of Western Atlantic Railroad, and Brown gave him a free railroad pass in 1889 to travel up to Kennesaw. King said that he bought Kennesaw land because it was along, quote, Joe Brown's railroad. However, the fact that his father-in-law already owned the land must have made the choice a whole lot easier. I think this is a very interesting story. I don't know if it quite is the whole story. The railroad pass was actually published in 1828 inside the Atlanta Journal. He kept it for all those years. So this is a facsimile published in the newspaper. And sure enough, that is Joseph E. Brown's signature. As early as 1914, Atlanta's black newspaper, the Atlanta Independent, made note of the visitors to King's property. Perhaps with a very strong sense of irony, they called it the Cornelius King Plantation up in Kennesaw. The Kings spent most of their time at 457 Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, about 2 blocks down from what would later become the Martin Luther King Jr. house. They spent their summers up in Kennesaw. And I should say, there's this King family of Auburn Avenue, there's the MLK family. I haven't found a connection. 2 different Kings. But still lived, like I said, within about 2 blocks of each other, so likely knew each other. On his property here in Kennesaw, King built a dam for a swimming pool, he added tennis courts, and he used the property as a working farm in these early years. And among the King family friends, it became a popular destination for summer visits. It was a nice, way to get away from the city for a while. In 1915, sensing a strong business opportunity, King decided that his land could become a summer resort, and he named it the King's Wigwam in honor of his Native American heritage. In May of 1915, the Atlanta Independent described it as, quote, one of the best and most comfortable places for his people seeking health, recreation, and pleasure, and one of the best and healthiest resorts for people of color in northern Georgia. It was said to have a lake for swimming, tennis courts, golf links, and a baseball park. For accommodations, he also built several cabins along the property. We may have had camping as well. King was called an advertisement for proprietor and manager. His daughter Botha was secretary and treasurer, and there was an E.W. Moore, who I don't have much information on, but he was a superintendent. During his first summer season, E.W. Moore wrote articles about the Kennesaw happenings for the Atlanta Independent. He said there was a baseball team that was organized, there was a farmers union, and a women's club all created as well. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner passed away in May of 1915, and the people at the resort actually put together a flower offering for the funeral on behalf of Kennesaw's residents. The Wigwam's first year in business was a very big success, and it attracted a lot of Atlanta's black elite at that time. It even attracted sports celebrities. There was a Atlanta's golf champion. There was a lawn tennis champion from Cincinnati, and there was a baseball player named Cyclone Williams who visited. The paper said that he spent his summers, quote, making daredevil dives into the bottomless pool at the Wigwam, which is a quote that I love for some reason. One newspaper advertisement said the resort had 4 rules. No alcohol, no kite playing, free canoeing and tennis, and 50-cent Sunday dinner. Let's see what's on. There's advancing. John Wesley Dobbs, later known as the unofficial leader of Auburn Avenue, and the grandfather of Atlanta Maynard Jackson, is known to have been a guest of the resort in its early years. Dobbs was actually born in Kennesaw in 1882 and was very close to his uncle, who still lived in the community at this time. He would pass regularly on the train because he was a railway post office clerk, and he was on the route from Atlanta to Chattanooga, so he passed right by the Wigwam for his work practically every day. The Atlanta Independent would publish an article about the Wigwam in July of 1915, and it was only signed J.W.D. But based off of context, I'm willing to assume that's John Wesley Dobbs. The article describes the tents of visitors, the beautiful spring, the, quote, cement dam which stretching across 50 or 60 feet, boat rides, fresh air, fresh milk, and a flagpole, which has on it the image of a great Indian chief. And that flagpole, make a note of that in your heads for a second. We'll be coming back to that pretty soon. As has already been seen a little bit, the Independent was a very valuable ally in promoting the Wigwam to black Atlantans. The Independent's editor was Benjamin Jefferson Davis, who had operated the paper since 1903 when it was founded. Like many of Georgia's black newspaper editors, he played a very important role in statewide Republican politics as well. He was not originally from Atlanta, was considered something of an outsider at the time, but from his newspaper he remained highly influential. His family would visit the Wigwam on several occasions during the resort's first year, and they published advertisements about the resort inside its papers, particularly in 1915-1916. They really published a lot about it, which had been a valuable resource. When I first began looking into the Wigwam, the Atlanta Independent was not digitized online yet, and this was really the key to unlocking a lot of this research. Without it would not be possible. Reverend Henry Hugh Proctor, another very early guest, was considered a spiritual leader of black Atlanta, with an influence perhaps only exceeded by that of Bishop Turner. Reverend Proctor brought his entire family to the resort, and his wife, Mrs. Proctor in particular, was a big fan of its amenities. Churches in Atlanta and Kennesaw were an important part of Wigwam's story. Religious leaders like Reverend Proctor visited, and the Wigwam was a site of church picnics from Atlanta and Marietta congregations. There were choirs from Kennesaw churches that performed for guests, and local congregations, including possibly those from Acworth, would use the Wigwam's lake for baptisms. In addition to notable individuals, the Wigwam served as a gathering place for organizations from black Atlanta. There was the Prince Hall Masons, including Dr. H.R. Butler, who was a very important leader at that time on Auburn Avenue, who came up this way, the Grand Order of the Oddfellows, a Criterion Club, records of the Young Men's Social Club, and the American Beauty Embroidery Club would all use the resort for different events. The Hamilton family, including Bertram Hamilton shown here, were very close friends of the Kings, and had visited the Wigwam before it was even a resort. They had been there in 1914 when it was still just King's private summer retreat. Alexander Hamilton and his son, Alexander D. Hamilton, were all prominent contractors in Atlanta. The younger Hamilton would have 7 children, so he's the grandson of the sort of patriarch of the family, and his daughter-in-law, Grace Towns Hamilton, was the first African-American woman in the Georgia State Legislature, and her portrait is also at the state capitol today. One of his other children was Theron Bertram Hamilton, who's shown here. He was at the time 22 years old. He was a World War I veteran and a student at Atlanta University in 1919 when he visited the resort on his last visit. Hamilton spent the day in Cartersville and spent the afternoon at the Wigwam. He had, quote, a pleasant hour before going to the Kennesaw Depot for the trip to Atlanta. While waiting at the Kennesaw Depot, he was, quote, approached by a group of countrymen and told he was I was suspected of something. They took the bag he was carrying and found a pistol and brought him at gunpoint on the train to Marietta Courthouse. He would ask several times why he was being sort of arrested and was never really told what he was suspected of. On reaching the jail in Marietta, he found out there was an attempted rape case up in Cherokee County that he was the main suspect for. It was a 17-year-old woman up in Cherokee County who claimed she was raped. She said that he had a gun, and they found him with a gun, and that was about the only evidence that they had. Very, very tenuous. Inside the jail at Marietta, Hamilton heard that the crowd expected a lynching. Sheriff W.A. Swanson would tell Hamilton that there were more cars and more people in Marietta than the Leo Frank lynching in 1915. Of course, probably the most famous incident of any kind like that in Cobb County. What makes this particularly interesting is that Sheriff Swanson, who made this comment, was actually part of the lynch mob that went down to Marietta and grabbed Leo Frank. So he certainly could speak with some authority on it. Swanson was very sure of Leo Frank's guilt just 4 years before, but he was doubtful that Hamilton was guilty. He just didn't believe it for some reason. And why remains something of a question. He made some of the story didn't add up. He thought maybe it was Hamilton's background, who knows. He just felt that something was off. That night he would turn off the jail lights, smuggle Hamilton down into a car, and drove the car to Atlanta to safety on the other side of Chattahoochee. His Alexander Hamilton Jr. would hire lawyers Herbert Clay and Harvey Hill to defend his son. And when the brother of a woman who claimed she was assaulted came down to the jail in Fulton County, she confirmed that it was not Beauchamp Hamilton. I've not found if they ever found anything more about the case. It seems to just petered out after that. Hamilton, so what he was able to escape. What makes this story particularly interesting from sort of a historical standpoint is, as a survivor, he actually wrote his account. It was a book by Professor Edgar Webster at Atlanta University that has a first-hand account by Beauchamp Hamilton of that day. The book was called Chums and Brothers, published in 1920. It was a great, great resource. Really helped bring the story alive. Nina King Miller, the daughter of Cornelius King, would remember decades later that her family would never return to Kennesaw after this happened. She was suspicious that the rape allegations in Cherokee County were fabricated, but she had no way of, she wasn't able to ever find anything more. Like I said, that particular incident just seems to have gone away after the wigwam. It's all very suspicious, I think. Almost exactly 1 year later, Cornelius King would sell the wigwam to local farmer J.D. Hildebrand for $3,500. I haven't found how much he purchased it for, but according to his daughter, he sold it at a loss, a significant financial loss to the King family. What happened to his resorts amenities afterwards? I have no clue. I can't find the house that was there, the cabins, the dam, the tennis courts, or the baseball field, or any record of where they might have been. I know where the property was, but I can't find where in the landscape these features were. There is a creek that runs through the area today. I'm assuming the dam was on it, but there's nothing left to show where it might have been. And then aerial maps of the 1940s exist, particularly aerial photography, and they don't really show anything like a lake. It seems to have all been removed somewhat quickly. Eventually, in the 1960s, it became a neighborhood. J.D. Hildebrand would sell the land to someone else, and then he sold it to developers from Atlanta, who built a neighborhood called Terra Park, which takes all of its street names from Gone for Wind. Scarlet Lane, Rhett Drive, Ashley Way, Melanie Drive, Terra Court, and 12 Oak Circle. I think for an African-American summer resort, the site of one, naming it after Terra, I think is a bit on the nose. It's a little bit heavy-handed of history here, but it's how it happened. And I can't find any evidence that when they built the neighborhood, that they knew about its earlier history, but it still, I think, is very interesting. Now, I mentioned earlier the flagpole and asked you to sort of make a mental note of it. In its own very unique way, the legacy of King's Wigwam does still live on Auburn Avenue. Cornelius King died in 1934, and the Atlanta Daily World said, quote, "His death closed a rich and full chapter of laudable achievement." Following his death, his family continued to run a successful real estate business. They were very, very wealthy for many years. In 1941, the site of a Cornelius King family home was actually torn down by the family, and they built a new apartment complex on the site dedicated in their father's memory. And it was called the Wigwam Building in honor of the earlier resort. The Articles published in Later Daily World at that time do not mention the resort, but the family and later accounts said it was definitely named after what was here up in Kennesaw. The building is actually still standing. Like I said, it's about 2 blocks down from the MLK house, and the Native American steel cutout on top of the flagpole, they kept that from the resort, and it was put on top of a corner of the building, where it can still be seen today, about a century later. It is the only physical, tangible piece of a resort that I can find anywhere. It's this sort of forgotten reminder of this once very important resort. The building has been restored. It was restored a couple years ago. It looks fantastic. It looks like a really, really nice site. During these 4 short years, the wigwam was open to visitors, 1915 to 1919. It was home to some of the wealthiest black families in Atlanta. It was a very, very unique place, and it really connected both Auburn Avenue with this area up here. But it's a place that a lot of people just don't know about. We saw the show of hands earlier. It really has a really fascinating story, one I always love sharing, and I hope you find it as interesting as I do. I'd like to find other ways to share this out there, like a historic sign or something, but hoping to have something in the works. We'll see. I've got a lot of knocking on wood to do. So part 2 of the story is George Washington Carver State Park. What I think makes this all very interesting is we have 2 strong examples of African-American recreation areas basically in North Cobb or South Bartow. Very, very interesting stories that kind of parallel each other in some ways, and also somewhat well documented now. Really make interesting sort of ways to compare each other, things to compare to each other. Sorry. So the man on the slide here is John Lloyd Atkinson, along with his wife. He was born July 26, 1904 in Crawfordsville, Georgia. He became very successful and built a house in Atlanta in 1941. The police, however, said he could not move into that house as it was built on a white city block. Atlanta at that time had very restrictive zoning conditions called the race block system, where certain blocks were white and certain blocks were black, and you couldn't go from one to the other. He ended up actually suing. And he ended up suing, and it took a while to go through the courts. In the meantime, Atkinson joined the U.S. military, and he was a Tuskegee Airman. He served for 2 years. In 1941, his court case eventually reached the Georgia Supreme Court, who ruled that the race block system in Atlanta was unconstitutional, and as such, he could move into his house in Atlanta. And the house is, last I checked, still standing, shown right here. On getting back from the war and moving into this house, Atkinson and many other African Americans, particularly in Atlanta, realized that the Georgia state parks were very exclusionary. They were whites-only state parks, but no park was open to African Americans. Inspired by this, Atkinson convinced the state in 1950 to lease 345 acres next to Red Top Mountain State Park. As I'm sure we all know, Allatoona Dam makes up Allatoona Lake. It was built about that time, and the Army Corps of Engineers was working building up parks along the shores of Lake Allatoona. The state was able to climb Red Top Mountain, and Atkinson convinced them to also climb another parcel of land, which would become George Washington Carver State Park. It is actually the first African-American state park in Georgia history. There were only 6 ever built, and it is the most well documented. It was the biggest, it was longest lasting, has a lot of these sort of grand titles to it. It was named after, of course, George Washington Carver, the famed scientist from Tuskegee. And the fact that that Atkinson was a Tuskegee Airman, I'd imagine had something to do with naming it after the famous scientist from the Tuskegee Institute. Atkinson was the first Pike superintendent, and he built a clubhouse, docks, and a playground, and he also developed the Pike Beach. The first reference I can find to newspapers is actually in the Atlanta Journal Sunday magazine of June 7th, 1953. There's a very brief reference somewhere on this page to George Washington Carver State Park. There's not a lot, but I really like these pictures. I just wanted to share them. They're nice photos. I want to sound out visual appeal here. It counts. One of the first references in African-American newspapers I can find is in the August 23rd, 1953 Atlanta Daily World. And that advertisement, which is also quite photogenic, is shown here. The Elks, the big fraternal organization, was visiting Atlanta at that time, and they were advertising to members of the Elks to come up and visit George Washington Carver State Park. They said it had picnic grounds, swimming, fishing, boating, refreshments, and dancing. This advertisement also, I think, has some good info. It's from about a year later in September of 1954 for Labor Day activities which were taking place. It mentions a swimming contest, water skiing, surf riding, bathing beauties contest, and more. The advertisement said it had quote, some of the best first Negro water skiers in action. I don't know much about the history of water skiing, but I could see that being real. That feels like a very 1950s thing. The park was incredibly popular and was host to many notable visitors, including Andrew Young and the King family. Performers came to the park as well, became something of an entertainment venue, and there's stories of Ray Charles and Little Richard performing there in the 1950s. In 1958, John Atkinson fell ill and had to resign as park superintendent after 8 years in charge of the park. He'd entered the former jewelry business, and he later did if you ever go to the governor's mansion and you see the plaster work, particularly the molding in the building, that was all done by John Atkinson's plaster company back in the 1960s. He passed away in the 1970s. The park's next superintendent was James Clarence Bentham, father of Robert Bentham, who we mentioned earlier, so I don't want to spoil anything there. Like earlier, make a mental note of that. Very interestingly, so I like Georgia political history. That's kind of becoming my thing recently. This park became involved in Georgia politics in 1962. Marvin Griffin was running for governor of Georgia at that time. He was a very staunch segregationist. There's all sorts of interesting stories about him. Not a lot of them great. But in 1962, with this very big shift in Georgia's demographics, voting patterns, stuff like this, he actually campaigned to black voters. And one of the ways which he did this was by highlighting how much his administration had spent on amenities for African Americans, including George Washington Carver State Park. I found this newspaper from 1962 talking about Marvin Griffin and his campaigning. I think this is fascinating because if you look at the advertisement on the left, it is about how much he's done for African Americans, the parks, there's a mental hospital mentioned, the orphanage, all this that he sponsored, and how much Marvin Griffin has done for the state's African American population. If you look at the other side of this exact same newspaper page, there's an article about how if you elect Marvin Griffin, it's a way of stopping African American voters, and how he's like the choice for white Georgians, on the exact same page of a newspaper. Fascinating stuff, like I said. Georgia politics really is one of the strangest things known to man. We have all sorts of great stories. In the 1960s, when I-75's route was being planned, the park actually returned to the news again. There was a big debate of where I-75 would be routed. At one point, it was going to be routed sort of through the park and then over Alatoona and then through Red Top Mountain State Park. They ended up moving the route for a number of reasons. There was some local outcry, but because of this, it hit the news quite often in the late 1960s. After the state park system was integrated in the 1960s, few people began coming to the park. A lot of visitors just went up to Red Top Mountain State Park or to other area parks. Because of this, in 1975, it was turned over to Bartow County and became Bartow Carver Park, open only at that time for reservations. It was one of 12 state parks closed in Georgia in 1975. At that point, it was about 307 acres, so it shrunk just a little bit from its original size. These photos all come from Visit Cartersville and just show life of a park in the 1960s. I wish they were a little bit clearer, but you still get a good sense, I think. I wish I had one of Ray Charles and Little Richard performing there. That'd be a gold mine. In 2016, it was renamed George Washington Carver Park, returning it to that original name as a way of honoring the history of the park. It is once again open to visitors. It had once been reservation only. You can now just drive up there. I've been there. It's very nice. These photos were taken about a year ago. This shows the beach, the clubhouse, the entrance sign with a cameo from yours truly, and what? Not anyone very attractive. And this is a nice historic sign that they have talking about the history of the park. Additionally, the Bartow History Museum up in Cartersville has done some exhibits about the park. There's some online videos about it. It's very, very well documented. This is sort of just scratching the surface of its history. And I would like to thank Trey Gaines and Bartow History Center. They have a lot of great information about the park. It was a huge help in putting all of this together. So without further ado, so man, you've all been waiting for. I'm just the opening act. Mr. Tim Houston here to talk about his experiences.
Thank you very much. I think Andrew gave y'all about all the information that I had about the Cobb. But what I wanted to try to do is talk about my experiences and to make the connections with Bartow Carver and the building that you're in right now and the community as a whole. So for those who don't know, I'm Tim Houston. I was born and raised right up here, right by Bethel on the corner, which my mom's house is still there right now. So tell the story. When we known it as the beach, it was Bartow Carver Park, but we always called it the beach. You know, let's go to the beach. Let's go to the beach. But on the weekends, it was really popular because living right there, I could stand at the hill there, and on the weekend you can see like 10 to 15 Greyhound buses coming down the road going to the beach, and you would have cars come. And it was fascinating because you would see like Cadillacs, Corvettes, all those kind of cars that you wish as a little kid that you wanted to have. And we would that's probably about when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, when all that was going on. But when I got a little older, we used to attend the beach. So we would go. We would start walking. You didn't have transportation. You would start walking. If you start walking, somebody would pick you up. And that's what would happen. We start walking, somebody would pick us up, and when you get out there, somebody would bring you back. So, and it was just a fun thing to do. But when Andrew was talking about Atkinson being a Tuskegee Airman, he's talking about Clarence Benham taking over for him. And Robert Benham, y'all know Robert Benham, the first black justice in Georgia. When I was working on the Rosenwald school here, he recognized my work and sent me a letter encouraging me to continue to do this because there's not many of these left. But they had one in Carterville called Noble Hill. And he had mentioned the work that he had done on that. And he said it was important to keep working on it to try to save it. So it's got a lot of Tuskegee connection. You got Booker T. Washington, which joined with Julius Rosenwald to start building these schools. So you got Atkinson, Tuskegee Airmen. Then you got Judge Benham, which was a Supreme Court justice. His father, I think, took over in 1958 and stayed there about 3 years. They lived out there. His family, his brothers, they actually ran. Judge Benham sold baits and worms. His brother and him was the lifeguards out there. And he mentioned a lot. He said it wasn't nothing for him to be out there. You run into Dr. King, Corell Scott King. The Ebenezer Church would do picnics out there. They would come up on the weekends. And he talked about Ray Charles and Little Richard. He even mentioned James Brown performing out there. But one of the things that when he talked about the skiing, there was a ski group called the St. John Ski Bees, St. John Ski Bees from the Jacksonville Beach in Jacksonville, Florida. They would come up and entertain on the weekend. They would do slaloms and do the pyramids. They would do all those things. And that's where Andrew Young learned how to ski. And Robert Benham, they learned how to ski doing that. So it was a lot of history with the beach out there. And one of the things that we benefited from as a community, if you knew the community, I don't know if y'all ever heard of the I think it's the Green Book. Okay, well, you go through the book, where you had to go in the community. So the people they came from Atlanta, Birmingham, South Carolina, all from down South Georgia, everywhere to go to the beach on the weekend. And so some of them stopped through here in the community. We had a couple of cafes over here, the Camel Hill Inn and Terry Austin's place. So it was economic for us. It would bring stuff into the community if people knew where they was going. So it was all exciting for us to be able to experience those things. But when they closed the beach in I think it was 75 is when they closed it, and that's when they turned it over to Bartow County. And the interesting facts about that, Andrew mentioned there was like maybe five African American parks in the state of Georgia, and every one of the park was connected to another state park. Like George Washington Carver was connected to Red Top, but Red Top was for all white, so that's why Atkinson ended up getting George Washington Carver. The same way it was one called Lincoln, Fairchild, Yum Grand. Those are other black park that was in the community, and every one of those closed because of budget cuts. So, and when they said they closed, they turned them over to the county that they was in. You had one like down in Sylvester. I'm not Sylvester, but I can't remember the name of the place. But all those parks closed, but Bartow Carver is the only one up to the date that still was pretty much intact the way it was. I mean, they developed it over the years. It started out with just a concession stand and just a little office and stuff, and they expanded with a big dance hall. They had what we call a jukebox or piccolo. The piccolo was before me. Jukebox was my age. So, so to make another connection, I don't know if y'all know Miss Lenora Harden, which is Helen Hill's mom, lived right across the street where they just put the Cowan house, lived there. She actually helped run the concession stand out there at George Washington Carver. So we got a lot of connection with the community. And there's another guy, his name is Robert Cotton. Y'all may not know Mr. Cotton from Cartersville. Well, he was the Boy Scout troop leader out there. He led that. And Mr. Cotton had a place in Cartersville, like a teen club. When we was coming up, 16, 17 years old, we used to hang out at Mr. Cotton's. Everybody said, let's go to Mr. Cotton. So it's a lot of spectacular connections to our community. And I'm glad Andrew brought this up because it speaks a lot about our community, Acworth, and because of the people coming from Atlanta, Birmingham, and all those places, that was a place of like refuge. It was a place you can go and just have fun. You didn't have to worry about nothing, nobody bothering you. It was your own little safe haven at the time. So it was really important to have that kind of place that you can go and just let your hair down, for lack of a better word. But the experience, like the people in Atlanta and some from South Carolina and Birmingham was having, I could understand why they would want to go there. But I really didn't have that experience in Acworth, like with the marching, the protests, and all those things. We didn't experience that in Acworth. During the same time when George Washington Carver was out there, we used to go swimming at the beach, right over here at Carver Park. So it was never a big issue with us. It was just, to me, it was just excitement to be out there, to see all the people and all the buses and the cars come. They would actually come on Saturday. If we get too late, they would sleep in the buses. They would stay there all night before they head back home. So I think being a part of the history, I'm glad that the people in Bartow County got together and put the name back. Because when they gave it to Bartow, they changed it to Bartow Carver, which is kind of like, that's because George Washington Carver was a very important man. He revolutionized the peanut. Not only peanut, but soybean. And I was telling my wife earlier, he took sweet potatoes and made plastic. Can you believe that? That's revolutionized. He was a really intelligent man. So that was connection from him to Tuskegee to Rosenwald, and Miss Lenora across the street, Robert Benham, Cartersville. All that is a connected history for us as people in the community. So I'm just glad to be a part of that. That's about all I have for y'all, unless you want to ask a question. I can answer a question, I guess. Uh-oh. Well, I answer questions for everybody but Pastor. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Woo! No. But you got a lot of people who experience Beverly, Sheila, Marsha, Shirley, Cedric. All of them experienced Carver Park the same way I did. It was just, it was a.
When you were a year behind me in school, and I didn't know till tonight that you integrated in fifth grade, everybody by option came a year before you, and then they closed that school then. How afraid were you when you integrated into the big White House over here across the road?
Afraid, I don't know if I was afraid. I was a little concerned because typically during the day we played with the white kids anyway. So it was like we was only separated in school because I remember Terrell King, all the guys, we all get together and play over on Durfield over there. We just play together. So I think the scary part about it is more so not the kids, but the teachers. Because to tell you an experience one of my friends had when he was in class, the teacher was asking questions and he was answering the questions. And the teacher got mad at the white students because they saying they was letting this black kid outdo them. So that kind of damaged him. He stopped asking questions after that. He tell me that story all the time. And so that was the fear. But for us, the kids and everybody getting along, that was never an issue. It was different. It was different.
We all played ball together.
Yeah.
Big ball was always on the ball field.
Exactly.
Beach football and baseball.
Exactly. Yep. So it wasn't really a segregation, just school. So, and it worked out really well for us. Any other question? Comment? Okay.
Comment.
Okay.
Because everywhere I go, when people find out I'm a native of Acworth, they can't believe it. I'm like this. And just like the book that we put out, it is a place to remember. Like you said, we did not have all of those problems that were going on all around us. We were safe here. Our parents taught us, and the church taught us to be proud of who we was, but to do our very best of whatever we did.
Yeah.
So it was nothing like, not fear, just go in and do your best.
Well, it was a little relief for me though, because going to Acworth Elementary, the teachers didn't know my mom.
Right.
So if I got in trouble, I didn't have to worry about them. But I didn't have it at Roberts. I didn't have it at Roberts because the teacher get you schooled, and because my mom for the teachers at the time we was living in the housing over here right next to Roberts School down there, and my mom used to fix breakfast for the teachers that was coming from Atlanta. Most of our teachers come from Atlanta. She would fix breakfast for them in the morning. So it was she knew the teachers. Trust me.
Great legacy. Anybody.
Is it known, did Atkinson have a tough time getting to have that carved out of the white part at that time frame? Did he have to politic really hard for it, or was it easy to get that area handed over?
I think it was Herman Talmadge is the one that rented the property to start from the Corps of Engineers to start Red Top Mountain. So John Atkinson went to him, and then from my study, he didn't have an issue. He just rented him leasing the property. He leased the property, paid for it himself. Him and his family moved out there, and he started building like the concession stand and all those things out there himself. So I guess it was just the state figured out it was something that they needed. I mean, it was a part of the separate but equal thing. We got these parks, but it wasn't really equal. It was just separate. You know that. Yeah.
But if it makes any difference, y'all had a newer school than we did across
We did.
Just to say,
And what he making reference to is the Roberts School. This is where Rosenwald used to sit where the Roberts School's at. So when the county, and actually Cobb County was the only one that had a African-American elementary school. Because all the kids from even across the line at Bartow, Kennesaw, they all went to elementary school up here in Acworth. Then when they finished over there, they would go to high school off on Lemon Street and in Marietta. Any?
thank you very much for sharing your personal experiences.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you so much, Tim Houston and Andrew Bramlett. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope you'll come next month. Our next presentation is going to be July 14th. We're going to have the great-great-great-great-grandson of John Collins, who is Jeff Donahue, is going to talk about John Collins, our Acworth's own Revolutionary War hero. So I hope you'll join us for that, and please help yourselves to some cookies and cake. And thank you so much for coming. Yes.
I need to say that I want to thank the Acworth History Foundation, which is doing a fantastic job in preserving our history and definitely being inclusive. I agree. I haven't joined yet. But I participate as much as possible, you know. But they have done a fantastic job in saving our history. So they put the placards out. The storyboards, they do all those things. So when you go around and every time you read the storyboard, think about it. That's them putting it together.
Thank you so much.
Y'all